Welcome to another episode of the Recovering Cinderella podcast. Real stories of hope, inspiration, and advice from women who have made it through divorce for women going through it. My name is Keri Lauderdale Olson. I am also known as Recovering Cinderella. I am a master certified life coach specializing in empowering women to move forward after divorce and create new lives they love. This week, we are talking to Kara from Tennessee. Hi, Kara. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Well, I appreciate you being willing to share your story. Now, most of the time when I interview women on the podcast, they have been divorced for a while. Kara's situation is a little bit different. She's been a member of my Recovering Cinderella support group. She's been great about uplifting other women and having this positive attitude, but she's actually been separated for 2 years and her divorce is not final yet. So this is a new story for us. So Kara, why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit about how long you were married and a little bit about your story?
Yeah, so I was married for almost 5 years. So it wasn't a real long marriage. Him and I had knew each other since he was actually my first boyfriend that I had. And so I knew him since middle school. And so I relocated from up north and we reconnected years later. And so we dated for about a year, married for almost 5 years, and have been separated. It'll be 2 years on the day before Thanksgiving. So that's
That's
a
a
little
rough time to
background.
separate, is right around
Yeah,
the holidays.
yes, and I'm sure we will get a little bit more into that space, but definitely something, and I would say just to start off, a pain that I had never experienced, and just like you said, around the holidays, definitely put another knife into the pain that I was already kind of going through.
So you were married for 5 years. Did something happen, or was it just a gradual realization that this just wasn't the right thing?
To be totally transparent, I knew before I got married that um, I shouldn't have been getting married. I had this idea, and I wasn't aware. I knew about mental abuse. I knew about emotional abuse. I really didn't know about psychological abuse. For me, it really didn't make sense. I will always say, well, isn't that mental abuse? As we're dealing with the mind, is that not the same? But I think I kind of defined it in my way of not really knowing you're being abused. You're really, being told and being convinced of certain things, and you really don't even know that it's happening. And then also just being introduced to spiritual abuse. That was a new understanding for me. My ex was a former pastor. And so, I knew just leading up to getting married, this wasn't the marriage for me. I really was trying to convince myself that I would change him. And not only was I trying to convince myself, he would say that, well, we're not married, so I really don't have to do all of that. Maybe if you were my wife, I would do that. And just saying that out loud is such an awareness that, being a woman of the type of work that I do, I wouldn't have never thought that I could easily be persuaded or abused in such a way that I didn't even know that I was being abused. And so, I remember, seeing some of it showing its face during the time that we were dating, starting real gradually. We started off long distance. And so just noticing little things, we would FaceTime together. He would think it was people in the background or a man in the background in the room. And he would say, well, who is that over there? And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's no one here. And so that started to show up a little bit more. And so then I got to the point I wouldn't even do it anymore. I said, you know what, we're not going to FaceTime because for some reason you're seeing something in the background or you're thinking someone is here and no one's here. So we would stop. And so we would start on the phone. We would talk all day, and even, at first it was cute because we would fall asleep on the phone, and then it started to be this pattern of, well, did I hear something in the background? Is someone there? It would start that same thing. And so each time it was a convincing of, well, what if I was there, Kara? If I was there, I wouldn't be acting like this. I've never done this long distance before, and I really started to justify certain actions to myself. Well, if maybe he's old school. He's not used to dating long distance. He has never done this before. And so he moved here, and it started to continue with certain behaviors, very paranoia behaviors, or a lot of accusing me. And so then it went to, well, if you were my wife. And so I really, again, that justifying the behaviors, I really thought that if we got married, that he would change, that would fix the problem. Even though the pattern had shown me something else, I really thought that would change. And so, and I have to take full responsibility because, I had to kind of do some self-analyzing. Why did I feel the need to fix, or why, when the signs were there, that I didn't pay attention, And so, it started to show up. We got married, and it started to continue, as most do. He definitely experienced some mental illness that was diagnosed, and so it was just a roller coaster ride of every emotion that you could think of. I don't know how many people have been a caretaker of a spouse with severe mental illness. But I have. I'm a survivor of that. And so just recognizing those throughout the marriage, seeing that behavior, allowing it to lose who I was, just being in a space. And again, I know we'll get more into detail of that, but to answer your question, it was a lot of signs there and a lot of things that told me this is not the marriage to get in. But
So you're not alone in that at all. I mean, I think many of us can look back, and I often talk about that gut instinct
yeah,
that kind of tells you this isn't right, and yet you override it with your head and your heart, and you're like, you want it to be right. You've chosen to be with this person, and you want it to be right, and we justify all kinds of things, and we talk ourselves out of things when we see those red flags, and maybe they're not as prevalent. It's happened to me. I mean, I was in an emotionally abusive relationship, and no one who knew me would ever believe that I would be in an abusive relationship, and I was. And there were red flags that I chose to either ignore or justify. Well, he loves me so much that he's this jealous. He loves me so much that he wants to know where I am every minute of the day. He loves me so much that, and you try to justify those things. And I think as women, it is really important that we trust our instincts. We have those gut instincts. And if those red flags are showing up, you have to pay attention to them. But I want to go back. You said that, you kind of knew this was going into it, but you wanted to fix him. You thought that once you got married, everything was going to be okay. And I think that is also something that's very
yes,
common. I think we all think that, oh my gosh, once we are husband and wife, then any issues that we have are going to go away, and it's going to be this fairy tale, and everything's going to be perfect. And
yes.
unfortunately, what happens is, and I think you and I can both attest to this, is any issues that you had before are actually magnified once you're married.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Women, we're just caretakers by the core anyway. Most women is caretakers. We want to care for people. And, we, a lot of us, myself, definitely felt that if I could love him through this. Forget about loving myself, because I clearly wasn't thinking in that moment about myself. I was thinking, if I do this enough, then I'll be able to fix him. I remember, I came from a single parent home. I didn't have a lot of model of marriage. And I remember this expectation that I had in my mind of what it should look like. not taking into consideration reality. I'm a workaholic. I tend to work a lot, but in my mind, you know, I'm the wife. I'm supposed to get up every morning, make sure the breakfast is cooked, and make sure his lunch is packed, and all of these things. And I was working more hours than he was, you know, but that was the expectation that I put on myself, knowing that I'm not even a cook. So knowing that, I mean, let's be very
We're going above and beyond there.
I can't stand cooking. I didn't know why I thought I could, you know, do that. But not only for the representative that he showed me, the representative that I showed him, that this was me, that I was going to be this wife that, you know, cooked meals, packed lunch, got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, even though I didn't go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning from working, and kind of set that expectation, because I felt that if I did all of this, then he would be okay. He would, you know, this was just a phase, and he, you know, and though that language he used, I'm just scared, I'm just nervous, I've never relocated, you know, things of that nature, kind of confirmed that, I mean, anything he wanted, I just got it, whether it was a meal or anything. If I thought he needed some, I would run out and get it, because not only, and I tell people to be real careful, that long distance relationship, I don't think it's enough resources out there, because I had to come to reality that we really didn't know each other. That in those moments of traveling, that I would go up there for, you know, 2 or 3 days, or he would come here, you are on your best behavior.
Yes.
In 3 days, I can keep up the expectation that you're going to have a meal waiting on you, or I can get up and cook. You know, everybody's kind of on their best behavior.
Best behavior. You're seeing the good side.
You're seeing the good side. It's like vacation, right? But, you know, so when I kind of added up the days that we were actually together in that year physically, it may have been equivalent to 2, 3, 4 weeks at most. Did we even know each other? And so I started to see, I mean, I had already saw some of it and some leaks of it here and there, because it's only so long, especially with mental illness, that you can hold it together. But we really didn't know each other. And so that fairy tale that we had created in that space of long distance relationship was not real. And so we got a rude awakening. And part of that is marriage, but I think that, of course, when you are separated with distance, and especially as much distance as we had, you know, it was different. It was definitely different. And so it was tough. It was the hardest 5 years of my life. To be fully transparent, some days I thought that death was better than life. I spent a lot of times at the lake, and I remember just journaling and writing, and I would circle the tears on the page as a reminder of what I was going through in that moment. And then just losing myself. I've always been kind of a leader and the queen of the pack. But to wake up one day and truly not know who you are, not know what you like anymore, not knowing, you know, if it's, you know, I remember kind of one of the worst times was deciding on whether to just take a shower, because I knew that if I took it, the repercussions of what I would have to deal with, if, you know, when I came home, where you been, where, you know, all of those things, and really having to decide, should I wait until the morning or should I take it now? Because I know what's going to come with that, you know. And so just that process of losing yourself, not knowing who you are anymore, is very real. It's very real. And I had heard people talk about that, and I never understood. I'm like, how can you lose yourself? You know who you are, you know? But it is very real.
It is. Especially, and you mentioned it earlier, when, you know, women are nurturers, we're carers, we take care of those that we love. And in doing that, a lot of times when the balance isn't equal, when you're not on fair ground and you're giving and giving and giving and trying to overcompensate for someone else in the relationship who isn't, then you do lose yourself. You
Yeah.
compromise and you give. And this is actually something I talk about a lot in my online courses and in my divorce coaching, divorce recovery coaching, is that you have to figure out who you are after your divorce, because you're not the woman you were before you got married, and you're not the woman you were when you were married, and you're still, those pieces are still with you, but you become a different person, and you've got to figure out who that is, separate from being a wife and separate from being a mom and separate from being, and a lot of women don't take the time to do that. And it is the most powerful thing that you can do, is figure out who you are on your own.
Yeah.
And I don't want to gloss over the fact you mentioned mental illness, and I have some experience with that, as one of my exes was diagnosed with mental illness after our divorce, and yet I had suspected it for quite a while. And when you're dealing with a spouse that has mental illness, and mental illness is very real, and there's varying degrees of it, but that puts an added complexity into the situation, and whether or not the spouse is willing to get help, and whether or not they're on medications, and once the medications get regulated, and when you're trying to make an already difficult situation better, that adds a complexity that few people understand who haven't been through it.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I commend you. You were dealing with a lot in 5 years. Was there, you mentioned the separation occurred right before Thanksgiving, which is difficult in itself, but was there one particular thing that happened, or was it just a breaking point that you reached that you were like, I can't do this anymore?
It was definitely a breaking point. I told him, because it would be physical threats throughout the relationship. And so, again, going back to that mental illness piece, he would convince himself things were real and that he was seeing certain things. I believe it was way more than what he was diagnosed with. I've dealt with certain disorders in my family, and then the type of work that I dealt with. And not only did he have a mental illness, he was in the mental illness field. And so that gives another complexity, because people in the field know what this looks like, and they know certain things and have a certain comprehension and understanding of the disease. So he knew what he was dealing with. But he had convinced himself that certain things were happening. And it could be that I pick up a piece of paper in front of somebody that was a flirt, or that was somebody I was talking to. It was very real. And so I remember telling him, out of everything that was going on, that if you threaten me again, it's a wrap. I cannot do it, because, to be honest with you, even initially I would tell myself, oh, he's just talking. But when you're dealing with somebody who is not in their right mind, you have to take those threats seriously. And so I said, you know what, Keri, you cannot continue to tell yourself that he wouldn't do this to you. It is very real. He may not, but we have to understand that when he goes into a different mind space, that's not him. His mind is not there. And so I took it seriously, and I told him, and for a while he did not. Now, he may have done other things that was indirectly saying, I'm going to do this or that. But I told him those words came out, it was a wrap. And so they came out. And I literally told my husband at the time, I said, if I get you a bus ticket, would you go back home? And I wasn't expecting him to say, yeah. I said it in front of somebody, so I think his pride and his narcissistic personality could not say no, because I had done that before, and it was like, no, I'm not going anywhere. He said, oh yeah, I go. And so within 24, and I didn't even have the money at the time, I made a phone call to my mom, and I said, Mama, I need your car. And she was like, do what you got to do. I mean,
she's like, okay.
It was no question asked. So I remember paying, having him one. It was the holidays, and this happened on a Monday. And as soon as he could get out was a Wednesday, and Thanksgiving was that Thursday. And he took it. And I remember just, being in the house. I had to wait a whole, almost 2 days, and just him doing certain things, and just, all the things that he was doing to intimidate me in those matter. And I just kind of prayed about it, and he left and got on the bus and left that day. But the straw that broke the camel back was definitely physically threatening me that last time.
And,
It had
and
all
physical, I don't want to, but I just want to make it very clear to our listeners.
very clear.
Whenever there is physical violence, I never promote divorce. I never, that's not what I wish for anyone, is a divorce. But when there is physical violence or threats of physical violence and you feel threatened, you have to take that seriously. That is not something that you mess with. It is not something that you play off. You have to take your personal safety very, very serious.
Yes, it's you have to. And I wasn't. I have to be honest. I wasn't. I just truly did not believe initially that he would hurt me. But and that was just my ignorance, and that was my, trying to make it work. But at the end of the day, you have to take something like that seriously. And so I finally did. And keep in mind, it was other things that were going on. It had gotten so bad that he wouldn't even work because he wanted to watch me. I worked from home, so he wouldn't even work anymore, so he could keep his eyes on me at all times. So it got very, very dangerous, in so many aspects of just, and again, anything could have confirmed his thoughts. It could have been me on the phone with a coworker. It could have been, it didn't matter. It was nothing that I could have done. And it took me a time to get to that thought process, because I would switch things. I would change things. I just talked about not even want to take a shower, but I would change things to try to, in my mind, adapt or try to help him feel more secure when that wasn't my job to do. But it came to a time when you're dealing with mental illness or a person that just has these type of issues and challenges, it's nothing that you can do to help that situation. It's just nothing. I mean, you can, support and from a distance if you're not hurting yourself, but it comes a time they have to want the help and they have to do the necessary things to get the help. And it took me over 5 years, because I saw it before we got married, to really understand that it wasn't me. It wasn't anything that I was doing wrong that was creating the circumstances that we were in. And so, so it was a combination of things throughout, but that, I would say, that was the last straw for me, is that, I cannot sleep next to anybody that I have to worry about will take my life. I believed what he said, and so it was time to go.
Yeah. So, it's been, you're coming on almost 2 years of separation. But your divorce isn't final yet. So you want to talk a little bit about what that process has been like for you?
So, to start off with, again, it was, you think that when you are in such a volatile, dangerous, miserable marriage, you think that when you cut those ties, that it's like rainbows and butterflies, like you could just, skate across the clouds and everything is good, right? But when he left, when he got on that bus and he left, and I confirmed that he was gone, everything in me just I felt like I had died. I really did. My spirit in that moment, my heart was broken. And I remember on Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, when the family is around, and I'm like the life of my family. It's rare that I'm not on top of the world, dancing, having some type of fun. And I remember coming early to help my mother cook, and I was just broken. And I wanted to rush and do everything I could before people would get there, because I didn't want to answer any questions and be reminded. And I remember just going home and it's something about that fetal position, right? When you're just feeling like you're at the lowest point of your life. I just remember balling up in that fetal position, covering my head up, even taking a Tylenol PM, because I just wanted to go to sleep. I just felt like if I could sleep this away. And the type of person, I have a low tolerance for medicine, so I don't take a lot of it. I can normally break it into fours and it has me knocked out. This was one time I couldn't even go to sleep, even taking a Tylenol PM, a full one, I couldn't go to sleep. My heart was broken. And so just that initial death of a marriage, I really was grieving. And so I went through that, I would say a couple of weeks, just not wanting to get out the bed. I didn't want to answer any questions. A broken heart just don't even seem like enough to describe.
No, it's your world's shattered. I mean,
Shattered.
even when you know it is the right thing to do, and it absolutely is, it's still the death of your dreams. It's the death of the family as you know it. It's, it is devastating.
Yes,
And it is, you do have to go through the grieving process.
Mm-hmm. It did. I went through it, and I, again, I cannot bow enough to this group because I found it, I believe, the day after Thanksgiving, that Friday, or either Thanksgiving Day or the day after. I found the group.
So that our leaders or listeners know, so the group you're talking about is a Recovering Cinderella Facebook support group that I started a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, the Facebook support group that Keri founded. I did a search in Facebook and ran across it. And in that moment, if nothing else, in that moment, it brought some normal to what I was feeling, because I felt like for me to feel this way after that type of marriage, something has to be wrong with me, because I just couldn't understand why I wasn't happy about being released from, the devastation that I was going through. And so for a couple of weeks, that lingered around. I really did some self-evaluation. I really wanted to understand, how did I attract that? For me, it was, how did I attract that type of chaos in my life? What about me was able to release the control and the power that I had within of just losing myself? I had to answer some very, very tough questions initially, because I felt like it could happen again. If I don't answer these questions, and at very minimum, and it doesn't mean that I didn't have grace for myself. I had to learn that over time, really having some grace and kindness towards myself, at the same time answering those tough questions, so that I could really, really be intentional about how did I get there, so that I wouldn't make those mistakes again. And so that was the first part, was grieving. The second part was really doing some reflection, which is part of the grieving process. And then after that, just healing. Healing for me looked like getting support from groups. Really, again, I can't emphasize enough of the compassion, the compassion I was willing to show him. How can I show that to myself? How can I love on me and find out who this new person was? Because like you said, you're a different person. You, in many different ways, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing. You are different, and that's okay. And learning how to embrace her again. What did I love now? What did I want to do? What was I passionate about? I answered all of those questions. I got into therapy and really dealt with that anger piece that came. I think I was more mad at myself for a time being than I was mad at him because I didn't understand how I got in that place so quickly.
Blamed yourself. You blamed yourself.
I blamed myself. Yes, I definitely blamed myself. Keri, you saw the signs. You saw this. Why did you allow him to talk to you? I work day to day with empowering women. I want to tell a quick story on when it really hit home. I service young ladies, and I remember on Valentine's Day, one of them coming to me and said, Miss Keri, are you married? I said, yeah, I am. And she said, does he treat you well? And I remember thinking to myself, I can't lie, but she's a child, and I remember saying, what do you think? What do I teach you? And she said, I knew he treated you well, and walked off. And I just remember my spirit just being saddened by the fact that I was teaching skills and tools to women and I wasn't even using them myself. And so that was, to be honest with you, that was the initial thing that happened in February before Thanksgiving. And it kind of spiraled a little down since then. But I just had to tell that story because it's but some of that is just, confirming. So it was little things like that. And so back to just going through that process, I really was intentional about, and let me back up. I gotta be honest. When I first separated, it's crazy to say, but I gotta be honest, that a part of me was just hoping he got it together. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe the distance, maybe he would get on the medicine that he's supposed to take. Maybe he would start his therapy.
Maybe he'll realize what he lost.
Yes,
him, right?
Definitely. One of the delays in this 2 years, the first year was almost wait. I was telling myself it wasn't that, but that's really what it really was. Mm-hmm. And I had to just flat out be honest after a time, like, he's going to fight, he's going to realize, he's going to take do what he have to do
to get me back, because
to get me back, And I remember going to therapy, and I admitted that to my therapist. And I remember her in such a nice way practically said, do you really want them back? Let's revisit this. She did it in her therapy way. She practically said, well, let me tell you about mental illness, what that is. And that's a long-term thing. And it wasn't even about the mental illness for me. It was more about just his inability to even try to manage it. But she gave me a real professional reality check. And she had to laugh at me because I guess my face said, oh no, just the thought of what that looked like, what that really meant to go back there.
Not where you wanted to be. But a lot of times, and it's what you're describing is so common. And it's because what we know and what we're comfortable with, even though we know it's not healthy or positive, is more comforting to us than the unknown, because the unknown's scary. Mm-hmm. And not knowing who we are if we're not married, and not knowing what will happen with our lives, and not knowing all of those things, a lot of times it's easier to say, you know what, I'll just go back to what I know, because at least I know what to expect there.
Yeah.
And so that's very common. And a lot of times there's a last ditch effort where, you try to reconcile because you're like, okay, we can make this work. And a lot of times that doesn't work. And because those issues haven't changed. Yeah. And unless both people are willing to really make a concerted effort, and they really are willing to work together to make their marriage work, that doesn't happen. And so what you're describing is absolutely normal, and it happens a lot. And it's that fear. It's that fear of the unknown that tends to be more powerful than, they talk about, what's the phrase, it's better to live with the devil than the one you don't.
Exactly. Yes, that is true. I mean, fear is a beast. It is a beast. And the spiritual healing that I went through, because I really, really was intentional about healing my spirit. Because it's one thing to be physically broken, but when your spirit is broken, that's a whole different ball game. And so I not only therapy, but really doing some spiritual work to really dissect what is this fear that I'm experiencing. And really wanting the freedom, liberation, of being who I am supposed to be and standing full in that person. And so that's what I did, just really invested in me like I invested in everybody else, taking care of me while I took care of everybody else. I call it the teapot pressure. And whereas you probably heard of it, that overflow of the cup, that when you have a teacup and you have that saucer ministry, they supposed to get what's in the saucer, not what is in the cup. So I made sure my cup was overflowing before I could offer anybody my love or my dedication or anything that I had to offer. And so that took about another year of just healing.
I love that. I want to applaud you on that, because that is so awesome that you recognize that, and that you gave yourself, the first of that, and you came first, and it's so hard to do that when you haven't done it for so long. So I
Yeah.
applaud you for that. So
Thank you.
that first year was more about just really coming to terms with, this really is over, and I
Mhm.
really don't even want him back, even if he
Yeah.
wanted me. So the second year was about you and finding yourself.
Yes. Yes. And then I find her. I always tell myself, your plan B can be way better than your plan A. And my plan B included me. It was about me. It was self-full, not selfish. And I really was intentional when I say, once I got healed, and once I was doing the work to heal, because I feel like you heal the rest of your life from something. But once I put in the work, wow. Like, I mean, if you could just get through that, not give up and just have it in your mind that I can get through. Give yourself time. I gave myself time to get through. I didn't rush anything. I gave myself the time at minimum that I put into that I was getting out of it. And so I did. Back to what you were saying, Keri, the first year was just reflection, the blame, the grieving, all the emotions that come with that. But the second year was being self-full and getting familiar with nature and earth and my surroundings and all the minute by minute blessings that we miss because of the brokenness that we have. And I just was intentional and I did it, and I can smile. And then things just started going crazy good in my life once I realized who I was and what I had to offer the world. And I can't even just smile enough and get excited enough about how my life has changed since I put in the work and did what I had to do. And what I've survived. I'm no longer a victim. I was a victim before. I'm a survivor. To survive what I had gone through, not only just with him, but even before him, says a lot about who I am. So my self-talk to myself changed. What I told myself changed. I can do this. I changed the narrative from how's my life going to be now to I can't wait to next year. I can't wait till tomorrow because I know what I can offer the world. So that's the 2 years in a nutshell. The process, once I got the courage to go down there, I realized I may have talked to him twice since he's left. I had to sell my house. It was in my name, but because we were married, I don't think he knew that he could have got something from that. Thankfully, we didn't have any kids together. We didn't have a lot of stuff that we had together. He kind of came here with me. So other than me selling the house, he signed off really quick. I was shocked. We really haven't had much dealings with each other. He kind of contacts my family now, but other than that, no dealing. So the process, because of COVID, it has kind of slowed down some things.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time, and I'm just excited about that moment. But I released
It's in the courts
yeah,
now. You're just waiting for the
yes.
courts to catch up, and then
Catch up.
but you've used this time, to really heal and to
Yes.
find yourself, and you're glowing. I mean, when you talk about this new life and that you found yourself, you just light up, and that's exciting to see.
It is.
That
It's a hard job putting on a facade, and we do. Just going out, and I'm not a person that's do well with faking. I'm not. And so I just remember that's a heavy load to have to carry, to have to act like you're happy or act like you're getting what you need or you're satisfied with life. And to release that load, it makes everything worth it, what I just went through. It makes every moment make sense in my life. It was about self-discovery. He just was one of the lessons I learned through. It wasn't about him. It was about me. And I put that in perspective in the front of my mind that what if he was just here for me to truly find myself? For me to learn what I accepted so I won't ever accept it again, And so I really just talked my way through that and self-talk my way to release those expectations for myself and for him. And that has given me a freedom that I never had, even before him, that I had not had before.
That is so inspirational. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being willing to share it. And there's somebody out there that will hear your story, and hopefully it will give them hope and inspiration and understand that they're not alone. And so I always ask my guests, what is the one thing that you would tell someone going through a divorce now that you wish you had known?
I wish I could break it down to one thing, so I'm going to be obedient in there. If I had to break it down to one thing, I would say that pain equals purpose, that the pain that you're going through will be purposeful. That it's kind of like having a child, and the most crazy, intense pain produced something that you couldn't even imagine that you could love the way you love in a child. So what if that pain that you're experiencing will birth a love for yourself that you didn't even know you could have, and enough to share with the world. And so you will get through this. You will get through this. It's a season, and I guarantee you it can birth the most beautiful season that you've ever experienced in your life.
That is beautiful. Thank you. That was so perfectly put. Thank you so much, Kara, for being on the show and sharing your story. And I really, really appreciate your transparency. If you are listening to the show today and you are not following me, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Recovering Cinderella. If you're interested in joining the Facebook support group that I host, that Kara has been a part of almost since the beginning, actually, you can find it on Facebook. It's the Recovering Cinderella Humor and Divorce Support Group. If you are looking for help getting through your divorce recovery, if you need some help moving forward and creating this new life you love and you're not even sure where to start, I do personal one-on-one divorce coaching. I am a master certified life coach. I also do small groups of 8 to 10 women where I put you together based on where you're at in your divorce process to help create that support group and move you forward in your healing and recovery. So you can find all the resources to that on recoveringcinderella.com. If you have your own Recovering Cinderella story, you can also apply to be on the show at recoveringcinderella.com. So thank you again, Kara, for being here, and tune in next week for another Recovering Cinderella story. Have a great week, beautiful. And remember, your story didn't end with your divorce. You are still writing it, and the next chapter is going to be even better than the last.
Yes. Thank you for having me.